I burned 100 wooden crosses in a bonfire on my private estate while my friends filmed it and laughed, and I posted the video online as entertainment because I believed the cross was the most offensive symbol in the world and deserved to be turned to ash. But before the last cross finished burning, something rose from those flames that no camera could capture and no amount of money could buy, and it brought me to my knees in the dirt in front of every person who had been cheering seconds before. Have you ever been so wealthy and so powerful that you believed nothing in the universe could touch you, not even God himself? My name is Mazen Khalid Al-Otaibi. I am 29 years old, and on April 14th, 2022, I stood on the grounds of my family's private compound outside Kuwait City and watched 100 handmade wooden crosses burn in a fire I had paid to build, surrounded by friends who thought it was the funniest thing they had ever seen. I had no idea that the Jesus whose symbol I was destroying would step out of those flames and shatter everything I believed about power, about wealth, and about who truly owns this world. I grew up in the Mishref district of Kuwait City, in a villa so large it had its own garden, swimming pool, and guest house. My father, Khalid Mansour Al-Otaibi, was one of the most successful private investors in the Gulf. He managed a portfolio worth hundreds of millions and sat on the boards of companies across Kuwait, Bahrain, and the UAE. But he was also a deeply religious man. He prayed 5 times a day without exception. He funded the construction of 3 mosques in Kuwait and 1 in Indonesia. My mother, Mazen, came from a prominent Kuwaiti family and wore elegant hijab that reflected her status. She led a charity foundation for orphans and hosted Quran recitation evenings for society women at our home. Our family name was known in every boardroom and every mosque in the country. Wealth and faith were not separate in our house. They were the same thing. While other wealthy boys my age were buying sports cars and vacationing in Europe, I was sitting in the majlis of our villa, studying under a private Islamic tutor my father had hired from Al-Azhar in Cairo. By 15, I had memorized the entire Quran. My father celebrated by gifting me a gold Rolex engraved with a verse from Surah Al-Fatiha. The elders at our mosque said, "Allah has blessed this family with a son who will carry the faith forward." I never missed a prayer. During Ramadan, I fasted without complaint and added voluntary fasts throughout the year. I prayed tahajjud regularly, rising at 3 in the morning in my air-conditioned bedroom to kneel on a silk prayer rug and whisper to Allah in the darkness. My devotion was real, but so was my arrogance. I believed that my family's wealth was proof that Allah favored us above others. My father also taught me to despise Christianity. He said Christians were the lost people of the world, billions of souls drowning in the sin of shirk because they worshipped a dead man on a piece of wood. He said the cross was the most blasphemous symbol ever created, a reminder that Christians had taken a prophet of Allah and turned him into a false god. In Kuwait, there were a few churches permitted for foreign workers, and my father resented every one of them. By the time I was 18, I had developed a personal obsession with the cross. Not curiosity, hatred. I saw it as everything wrong with the world compressed into 2 pieces of wood. I bought crosses from online shops just to snap them in half. I collected them the way some people collect trophies. Breaking them became a hobby. I had no idea that my hatred of the cross was actually a war against the very person who had been pursuing me since before I was born. By 27, I had taken over a significant portion of my father's investment business. I managed real estate projects across the Gulf. I drove a Bentley. I wore custom suits. I was engaged to a beautiful and devout woman named Dalal, the daughter of a Kuwaiti diplomat. I had more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I threw lavish parties at our compound. I traveled by private jet. I had everything the world could offer and the religious credentials to feel righteous about all of it. Ask yourself this question. Have you ever built your entire life on something you were absolutely sure would never break? The idea for the 100 crosses came from boredom. That is the truth. When you have everything money can buy, you start looking for experiences that make you feel something. A friend named Abdulaziz, who shared my contempt for Christianity, suggested it during a late-night gathering at my compound. "You have broken dozens of crosses," he said. "Why not go bigger? Commission 100. Build a bonfire, film it, post it online. It will go viral." The idea electrified me, not because I thought it was particularly brave, because it felt like a statement, a public declaration that the cross was worthless, that the symbol billions of people worshipped was nothing but kindling. I hired a carpenter in the industrial district of Shuaik to build 100 wooden crosses, each one 3 feet tall. He was a Filipino Christian. I remember the look on his face when I told him what they were for. He said nothing. He just looked at me with an expression I did not understand at the time. Sadness, not anger. Deep, quiet sadness. I paid him double and told him to deliver them within a week. I had no idea that the Jesus whose cross I planned to burn was preparing to reveal himself in a way so dramatic that my entire understanding of God, power, and the meaning of the cross would be destroyed in a single night. The preparations took 2 weeks. I had a fire pit dug on the north side of our compound, large enough to hold all 100 crosses at once. I bought accelerant. I hired a videographer to film the event from 3 angles. I invited 30 friends, all wealthy young Kuwaiti men who shared my views. Abdulaziz helped organize the evening like it was a party. There was a catering tent, shisha, cold drinks, music playing from a portable speaker. The 100 crosses were stacked in a pyramid beside the pit, their pale wood bright against the desert sand. Our plan was simple. I would light the fire, we would watch them burn, the videographer would capture every second, and I would post it online as a statement of Islamic triumph over the cross. I felt completely certain Allah approved. The night before the burning, I prayed tahajjud at 3 in the morning. I pressed my forehead to my silk prayer rug and asked Allah to bless what I was about to do. But as I knelt in the darkness of my bedroom, something happened I could not explain. A weight settled on my chest so heavy I could barely inhale. My heart pounded. My hands trembled against the rug. It felt like someone was standing in the room with me. I opened my eyes and looked around. Nothing, just shadows and the green glow of my alarm clock. I told myself it was Shaitan trying to weaken my resolve. I told myself the pressure was excitement. I barely slept. Have you ever been so convinced you were defending truth that you never considered you might be provoking something far bigger than yourself? The burning began at 9 o'clock in the evening. The April air was warm and dry. The compound was lit by landscaping lights that made the palm trees glow. 30 men stood in a loose semicircle around the fire pit. The videographer positioned his cameras. The 100 crosses stood in their pyramid, pale and still, like a small city waiting to fall. I walked to the pit, carrying a torch soaked in accelerant. Abdulaziz started a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I touched the flame to the base of the pyramid. The fire caught instantly. It climbed the wood with a roar. The crosses began to blacken and crack. The men cheered. Someone played a nasheed through the speaker. The videographer circled the pit, capturing every angle. I stood at the edge with my arms folded, watching the flames consume cross after cross, feeling nothing but satisfaction. By the time 80 crosses had burned, the fire was enormous. The heat pushed us back several meters. Sparks climbed into the dark sky like orange stars. The smell of burning wood filled the compound. I was filming on my phone for my personal social media when I noticed something strange. The last 20 crosses at the center of the pyramid had not caught fire. The flames roared around them, over them, through the gaps between them, but the wood itself was not burning. I thought the accelerant had not reached them. I grabbed a container and stepped toward the pit to pour more. That is when it happened. The moment that changed everything I believed about God. The flames shifted. Not from wind. There was no wind. They shifted inward, pulling together like a living thing drawing a breath. The fire contracted into the center of the pit, into the space where those 20 unburned crosses stood. And then the light changed. The orange and red of the fire became gold, pure, radiant, living gold. The heat did not increase. It transformed. It became warmth, the kind of warmth that moves through your chest and grips your heart. The container of accelerant fell from my hands. I could not move. My legs locked. My arms hung at my sides like they belonged to someone else. And in the center of that golden light, standing among the 20 crosses that would not burn, I saw him. Jesus. He was standing in the fire, not burning, not in pain, standing with an authority that made the flames look like decorations around a throne. His robe was white. His face was the most human and the most beyond human thing I had ever seen. His eyes found mine across the fire and the distance and the smoke, and they held me the way gravity holds the earth. There was no anger in his face. There was grief, and behind the grief, a love so enormous and so specific that it felt like a weapon aimed directly at the walls I had spent 29 years building around my heart. He spoke. not through the air, through the center of my being. He said, "You burned my cross because you believed it was weakness, but the cross is the only place in the universe where perfect power and perfect love meet. Every cross you destroyed I allowed, because I am not fragile. But I brought you here tonight to show you what you have been fighting. You have not been fighting wood. You have been fighting me, and I am not your enemy. I am the one who has loved you since before you were formed. The wealth you worship will rot. The kingdoms you serve will fall. But the cross you tried to burn when every throne on earth has turned to dust." My knees buckled. I collapsed into the sand. My face hit the ground. Tears poured from my eyes so fast I could not see. I was shaking so violently that Abdulaziz thought I was having a seizure. He ran toward me, but before he reached me, he stopped. He was looking at the fire. He saw the light. He saw the figure. He fell to his knees 10 meters away from me and began to weep. Across the compound, men were dropping, one by one. Some fell to their knees. Some sat on the ground with their hands over their faces. Some ran to their cars and drove away. The videographer dropped his camera in the sand. The music stopped. The only sound was the crackle of flame and the sound of grown men crying. Minutes could have been hours. I had no idea that the symbol I hated most in the world would become the thing that saved my life. The fire eventually died. The 20 crosses at the center were still intact, unburned, perfect, pale wood without a single mark. I crawled to them on my hands and knees. I picked one up. It was warm, not from fire, from him. I pressed it to my chest and cried harder than I had ever cried in my life. Ask yourself this question. How do you explain 20 unburned crosses standing in a fire that destroyed 80 others when the living God was the one standing among them? 3 days later, I found myself outside a small Filipino church in the Salmiya district of Kuwait. I had not slept. I had not eaten. I carried one of the unburned crosses in a bag. A woman at the door welcomed me with a smile. I walked inside. The room was small. The air smelled of incense and candle wax. A priest named Father Renato, a Filipino man with kind eyes and calloused hands, was preparing for a midweek service. I placed the unburned cross on the table in front of him and told him everything. He listened. He wept. He held both my hands and said, "Jesus already forgave you the moment the first cross caught fire. He has been waiting for you." And there, in a church smaller than my bedroom closet, surrounded by Filipino and Indian workers who earned in a year what I spent in a day, I prayed the prayer that ended one life and began another. I said, "Jesus, I burned your cross 100 times, and you stood in the fire and loved me anyway. I have been fighting you my whole life. I am done. Forgive me. I know you are real. I surrender everything." What happened next changed everything. The room erupted in quiet joy. Foreign workers who had been praying in secret in a country that barely tolerated their faith now surrounded me with embraces and tears. 7 of the 30 men from that night eventually came to faith. Abdulaziz was the first. He contacted me 2 days later and said, "I cannot unsee what I saw." I was baptized 3 months later by Father Renato. I chose the name Stephen because Stephen was stoned for his faith and saw Jesus standing in heaven, and I had seen Jesus standing in fire. The morning I told my father, he was sitting in his office reviewing contracts. I placed the unburned cross on his desk. He stared at it. Then he looked at me. His face changed from confusion to disbelief to a rage so cold it froze the air between us. "You are no longer my son," he said. "You are dead to this family. Take your cross and leave my house." My mother called me that evening. She was sobbing. "How could you do this to us? Your father has not spoken since you left. You have destroyed him." She blocked my number the next day. Dalal sent me a text message. It said only, "My father says you are an apostate. Do not contact me again." Within a month, I was removed from the family business. My accounts were frozen. Friends I had known since childhood held a funeral prayer for me at the mosque. I received 12 death threats. I had to leave Kuwait. I fled to a country in Europe where a Christian organization helped me begin again. I arrived carrying 1 suitcase and 1 unburned cross. That is when it happened again. A quiet, unshakable peace that filled every space the losses had hollowed out. I had lost a fortune, but I gained everything that truly matters. Jesus Christ. Forgiveness. A peace no amount of money had ever been able to purchase. and a purpose that burns hotter than any bonfire I ever built. It was in Europe that I met Sophia. She was a Jordanian Christian woman working with a ministry for persecuted believers. She had steady eyes and a faith that did not bend. I told her everything. She held the unburned cross in her hands and wept. We were married 8 months later in a small church ceremony. Father Renato flew from Kuwait to officiate. Abdulaziz and 3 of the other men who came to faith that night stood beside me as groomsmen. Today, I work in ministry, sharing my testimony across Europe and the Middle East through secure channels. Over 90 Muslims have given their lives to Jesus after hearing my story or seeing photographs of the 20 unburned crosses. I keep one of those crosses on my desk. I touch it every morning before I pray. I returned to Kuwait once, in secret, and drove past the compound at night. The fire pit is still there, filled with sand now. I sat in my car and wept, and thanked the God who met me in a fire I built to destroy him. I still send letters to my parents through an intermediary twice a year. I tell them I love them. I tell them about Sophia and about our daughter Noor, whose bedtime prayer is, "Jesus, thank you for standing in the fire." No response from my father. But my mother sent a single message last month through a relative. It said, "I found the cross you left on your father's desk. He never threw it away. Ask yourself this question. If the cross you have been running from is the very thing that will save you, how much longer will you keep running?" The Arab millionaire who burned 100 crosses for entertainment no longer exists. In his place stands a follower of Jesus Christ, who carries an unburned cross every day and would trade every cent he ever had for the treasure he found standing in the flames. If he can transform someone like me, someone who built a bonfire to destroy his symbol, and watched him walk out of the fire with nothing but love in his eyes, then he can absolutely transform you, no matter what you have done or where you come from. The same Jesus who stood among 20 unburned crosses in a fire built by hate is standing before you right now through this very testimony. He is not fragile. He is not offended. He is not waiting for you to be good enough. He is standing in the middle of whatever fire you have built in your life and offering you the same love that brought a millionaire to his knees in the sand. Look inside your own heart right now. Jesus is calling you right now. Will you let him in, or will you keep burning the very thing that was always meant to save you?